Link, share, subscribe.
No, I wasn't going to do that. It's actually even worse than that.
I got this. What's up, guys? We're here at Free Live's first YouTube. What's up, guys? We're here today. We're filming our very own Developer Talk podcast filming. We're pretty excited. Talking about Protest games. What are your favorite Protest games? Let us know in the comments below. Gonna talk about some poop and Albert and Otto. And what do you like more, poop or Albert and Otto? Let us know in the comments below. Do remember to like, share, and subscribe. Pretty excited.
So ants.
Should we say hi? What is this, a design talk?
Yeah, and as a subtle form of protest, we've decided to not talk about game design, but instead to tell one of the untold game dev stories of South African game dev history that we really feel deserves to be heard. And that is the story of a sequence of games by a developer called K-Bros Games.
I think where it fits in here as a somewhat of a protest to the design talks is there was amongst this an example of what is kind of a protest game. 2015, there's this developer, a South African developer in South Africa on the forums making a game called Albert and Otto. It's a very Limbo-esque game.
It's a heartfelt puzzle platformer. I think it's set during one of the world wars. It's about finding this girl.
You have a companion who is like your best friend who needs to help you solve puzzles.
Quite high production value, high effort game. It played well. One of the better games in development in South Africa, at least at the time.
There was some press outlet saying that,
yeah.
It went through Steam Greenlight at the time, so they got enough votes to put it through a lot quicker than many of the other games that have kind of lingered in Greenlight around the time.
It did well enough to get through Greenlight. Got onto Steam. But then on Steam it didn't do so well. I'm not sure. I think it's recovered quite well since. But at the time, I think they considered it to be a financial failure from talks with them.
It definitely was a financial failure. So this was a game that they'd spent like 3 years on. It came out, and like a lot of games on Steam, probably got like 600 sales or something, somewhere in that order of magnitude, and kind of just disappeared. For the amount of effort they had put into this, it wasn't what they'd hoped to get out of it at all.
Yeah, and I think especially considering that most of the South African game dev scene at the time really believed in the game, thought it was something good. It was also on trend at the time. There were other similar games coming out that were doing well here and there. And the other thing that was happening at the time of Steam Greenlight was that these really clickbaity games started coming out. YouTube and gaming was on the rise, and these kind of low-effort games were kind of doing really well with YouTubers.
I don't know if it's a widely used concept, but like YouTube bait as a games that were just gross or very frustrating, or had a lot of like jump scares in them, and could get good reactions out of YouTube. This was like really a thing, and these developers looked like we had spent 3 years making this game that hadn't done so well, and there's these what they thought were shit games doing well, doing comparatively well, or even better than theirs, while still having bad production values and just having like this one bad joke as a reason to get YouTubers into it and get reaction. They were understandably frustrated. They'd poured their love into a game. It hadn't been rewarded. People were doing what they, I guess, felt were like doing games cynically.
As an outpouring of their frustration that this game with autistic ideals didn't do well, while these other games with almost no artistic ideals and way less effort than they'd put in were doing well. They made another game in, I believe, the span of a week or 2 weeks.
No, it took a week,
yeah,
they said.
And they called it There's Poop in My Soup, and you play as a ginger kid on a roof, and there are pedestrians and passers-by on the road below, and you poop on them. And that is the entirety of the game.
The genius of the game is that they flail their noodle arms and run around after you poop on them.
Yeah, they flail around, they fall, there's a guy on a bike, you poop on his head, he crashes into a table. It's pretty good. And then on top of the just pooping on people, there are all kinds of poop achievements that you can get, and you get different poop abilities. Just because the other thing that was happening was achievement hunter games. People would make games just with achievements in them. So there were also, I think, or I believe, like parodying that. We're gonna put a bunch of shitty objectives in our shitty game about shitting on people, and that was kind of their form of protest.
Yeah, the way they described it was they were angry and they wanted to make something terrible to prove a point.
Right. Their Spoop in My Soup did phenomenally well. It made more money in its first month than Albert and Otto did. And at that time in its span, which was about 6 months, I believe, after the release of Albert and Otto, There's Poop in My Soup came out.
So it was at 100,000 sales or so in its first month. And Albert and Otto had probably 1,000 or so. You know, every big YouTuber made a There's Poop in My Soup video. It was a sensation on YouTube for a very short span.
I mean, they really proved their point. As a creator, must have hurt to have this kind of sarcastic experiment of yours do better than your, like, genuine attempt.
Yeah, that's got to change you, right? Like, you be cynical about it, and you see that, like, rewarded, and that's got to mess you up a little bit.
I think it's got to, like, kind of change your design outlooks. What's further interesting is then they continued on this train for a while. So There's Poop in My Soup does kind of really well. And then they're like, well, we've figured out to an extent, like, what the market wants and what the market likes.
They decide that bait of some kind is what the market wants.
And a few months after, I think on a little bit more work than There's Poop in My Soup, but also, I think, fair to say, a low-effort game called Super Duper Party Pooper, which is a collection of poop mini-games. And this Super Duper Party Pooper, which now, ironically, was a genuine attempt to clickbait rather than a sarcastic form of protest, did not do so well compared to There's Poop in My Soup.
Yeah, considering it was probably still a low-effort game, it probably did all right. But it's an order of magnitude. It's like probably a tenth of the kinds of sales that There's Poop in My Soup made, possibly on a slightly larger budget. It still got picked up, I think, a little bit on YouTube.
Yeah, there was definitely a Jimquisition video about Super Duper Party Pooper. So it got some visibility and some traction, but it didn't quite take off the way There's Poop in My Soup did.
So one of the things about There's Poop in My Soup that I thought was interesting, that despite this being an obvious YouTube bait game, it actually translated into some sales, and I think that might have something to do with there is like something authentic about There's Poop in My Soup.
If you look at it with the knowledge under which it was created, there's definitely a frustration visible in how There's Poop in My Soup is put together and how it plays out and how the achievements come and just how the whole game is structured.
It's a cathartic game in the same way as like people run over pedestrians in GTA. Pooping on people's heads in There's Poop in My Soup is a game that feels good if you're frustrated. It's like, well, if you particularly feel frustrated at bourgeois people eating at restaurants.
And somehow that resonated in some way without people even realizing that there was some artistic merit to what There's Poop in My Soup was trying to do. For real, like,
no one knew that there was any artistic merit.
Right. When they had like outed their frustrations and they were like, let's just make a poop game because that clearly worked, it didn't work again. So I don't know what that really says or what the takeaway is, but I just find that story so fascinating about how this like utterly sarcastic Poop in My Soup experiment just did so well. I think this Poop in My Soup is like the punkest game. Like, it is probably, of all the punk games, and I've seen some really cool and really amazing punk games, I think There's Poop in My Soup is the punkest game. And I think that's why it succeeded.
Well, it punked everyone at the time, right? My takeaway a little bit, I mean, we were talking about this as a protest game, and I don't think just making a protest game guarantees any kind of success, but I do think that there's a definite anger to There's Poop in My Soup that is something that you see in other games. So another protest game, or sort of a game that was made somewhat in protest, was the original Five Nights at Freddy's. The creator had made quite an expensive Bible game before this with like monsters and like you battled them and they were very creepy looking, and the audience kind of responded with, this game is meant to be very Christian, but like it's actually really horrific. Like, why did you make this kind of? And so he said, okay, if you want to see horror, I'm going to show you. And he makes Five Nights at Freddy's, also on a relatively small budget. I don't know if that's necessarily if I want to draw a line between Poop in My Soup and Five Nights at Freddy's, but I think there is a thing that if you have a point to make, and you can use that kind of anger as motivation, I think it can lead to very good work. I know for myself, certainly at the early stages of Broforce, some of that was made in anger. There was this kind of bros saving the world in America, and like early versions of Broforce, I think feel a lot more aggressively anti-America than the later versions did. But there was that anger there at the start. I think at one point we had a conversation about, should we even have American flags in the game, because it felt actually kind of negative the way it was being portrayed. People were still responding to it. But I do think the anger as a motivator actually can work, and can allow you to do good work, because you have now a point to make, and if you actually get that into the game and it resonates, then you've got something that resonates. And like, there's so many games that are just, I want to make a game that looks like X or sells this much, or is, people like the same way they like another game, and all the design decisions are made around, hey, I want to, be successful in a similar way to something that already exists. As soon as you're going, well, I'm going to make it for catharsis, for myself, you already are freed of those traps that lead you to conventional game design decisions.
Takeaway for me as well is I like to say that you don't have to show in your game directly how you are coherent, how your game is coherent. As long as your backstory in your head is coherent to what you're creating, it'll come through in the work. So I think like the fact that there's some frustration driving, there's like a message behind this Poop in My Soup that was aimed at the games industry at the time, led to coherent decisions being made that is somehow still tangible even through the there's Poop in My Soup filter, where the Super Duper Party Pooper didn't have that kind of single thread kind of pushing the design in a specific direction and pushing the game's message in a specific direction. Yeah. And that just somehow made it less alluring than there's Poop in My Soup.
You feel a lot of the decisions being made as, this will just be gross, like why not poop in a mouth? Wouldn't it be embarrassing if they danced now? Or that kind of thing. It's clearly not coherent, but it's clearly from we're trying to make bait, and this feels baity, so let's do it. I mean, I think a lot of the time, all you really want out of a game is to surprise people. People aren't playing games to play the same game again. I think there is a trap of following other games and therefore ending up conventional and ending up, the second game that someone plays in a similar vein, and that never works.
Yeah, I think the message is just, if there's something that you want to say via whatever art form it is, in this case games, and you genuinely use it as a vehicle for expression, people still pick up on it. And it makes for a better experience. And the thing that you're trying to say doesn't have to be very clear. The emotion driving your decision to make the thing doesn't have to be coherent to anyone but yourself. But the fact that it's there will lead to something that it somehow just resonates more. Poop in My Soup is obviously not a better game than Albert and Otto, but it's more resonant, apparently, at least.
It was more surprising, certainly. It avoided conventionality. I don't know how many other games there are out there that have similar stories, but most of the time I feel like developers' stories go like, and even for us, like, I want to make a game, I'd like it to be sort of successful, I'll try and make a game that looks similar and feels similar to other successful games. I think this is a story we had insight into because we're from South Africa and we met these guys and they told us, I wonder if there's any other games that were made with similar motivations, and I'd love to hear those stories or any insights. It's a curious subject matter for me. I want to make angry games, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's all talk.
Yeah.
I feel not enough people know of the story, and if K-Bro sees this...
We think I hope you make another There's Poop in My Soup.
Yeah. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Pretty excited.
I'm so amped.